Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. This episode is going to be a first-hand account of what it's like to be married to someone in prison. One of my listeners, Miss Cindy, she did an episode for me when everything's not peaches and cream. Check that episode out if you haven't. It's a good one. It's a really good one, y'all. But she did that episode for me, and I asked her would she do another one about what it's really like. Give me an example of situations and stuff like that, what it's like to be married to someone in prison. And she agreed, and I'm glad that she did. This episode is it's very emotional, very revealing, and one of the goals of the podcast is to just give you that glimpse of the other side of things. I talk about things that you can do to make sure that the relationship that you have with someone in prison is solid and true. But I don't ignore the fact that sometimes it just doesn't work out. And in this situation, in Miss Cindy's situation, she loved him to the end. What it revealed to me, and you'll have to make that determination for yourself when you listen to the episode, but what her testimony revealed to me was that some people keep that wall up. Some people have been so traumatized in their own lives that they, for whatever reason, can't seem to accept or receive the love of somebody that's good to them. That's what I took away from this. And it was a sad situation, but it was eye-opening. I learned something from it. And I know that you will too. So I want to encourage you to listen to this entire episode because it's very moving and very emotional. I said that before. But I think it's one of those situations where it's worth it. It's worth the emotional roller coaster that you're going to go on listening to what she's saying because you're going to learn a lot. And you're going to learn a lot. And it might give you some insight into what you may be going through. And again, relationships, whether they're with someone in prison or outside of prison, sometimes they don't work out. But that shouldn't change you from being the type of person that is always going to be open to love, right? That's what I took away from this. Miss Cindy's got a good heart, and she deserved better. But, circumstances are what they are, and sometimes, you know what I mean? So take time, lean back, relax, whether you're on your way to work or at home, chilling, or just, getting a jog in. Whatever you're doing right now, you listen to this podcast, look here, I appreciate you. But enjoy the show.
Being married to an individual who's incarcerated takes a strong, very strong woman. Here's my story. My husband was incarcerated in the state of California for nearly 9 years. Oh, I supported him in so many ways. He really didn't know how to read and write too well. So I got tired of the letters he would send me that somebody else had written. Obviously he was dictating to them what he wanted them to write, but it didn't feel like it came from his heart. So I started to teach him how to write letters, and I would send him a list of words and the meanings of those words. And I taught him how to read that and actually, send me a letter in his writing. He caught on. There was never a doubt that he loved me until the end. So I never missed a visit for 7-8 years, solid. Visiting was Thursdays and Fridays in the evening from, I believe, 5 to 9. And then on the weekends, obviously, you could visit for about 4 or 5 hours, depending on if the prison was on lockdown, not on lockdown, those sort of things. So sometimes we would need to travel for 3 hours before we got to the visiting. And then once you get there, you have to get checked in, you have to go through a line and you have to get through the metal detector and all of that. Then you have to walk down to the visiting room usually. Didn't matter if it was rain, snow, whatever. The elements were out there. There wasn't always a clear passage into the building. Sometimes we would drive those 3 hours to visit him, and it might only be an hour-long visit because too many people were there to visit, or the prison was on semi-lockdown. Or sometimes I would get there and we would visit 6 hours. Kind of hardly never knew which it was going to be. There were good times. You know, he would request that I bring him outside food. And some of the prisons were extremely lax, where I could bring in different types of food. I'm a larger breast woman, and I would just put it in my bra underneath my breast. And, you know, anywhere from chicken to burritos or jalapenos, you know, and he would get a good meal that day. I also brought whatever kind of package he asked me to bring to him. I brought it. Not ever once did I think of the risk of my children. Because I loved this man. Oh, I loved him deeply. And I thought, well, you know, you made your vows. You got to work through this. It's just a wall. You can get through this with him. So in the state of California, we also were allowed to have conjugal visits. And usually it was about anywhere from every 90 days to every 6 months. And obviously, I was a single mother. I would take my daughter with me. And even during those visits, there was so much tension on his side because he would be, I don't know, concerned, worried about what I was doing on the outside, which I wasn't doing anything. I was so loyal. It was absolutely mind-boggling that I was able to put my needs aside during those times. But I did. I was loyal. You know, so there were a lot of days when, you know, the visits would be rough, you know, because he'd be agitated, and I would say, you know, I would think, why are these guards allowing, you know, inmates with so much hostility to come out here like that? It's, you know, I was so fearful he would just break in the visiting room. But I still hung in there. I sent him his boxes. I sent TVs. I sent, you know, every week, every Friday when I got paid, I sent him a quarter of my check. No questions asked. And I didn't send it just through regular mail. I made it to the post office and sent it overnight so that he was important to me. You know, I wanted him to feel like he was a king. It was truly a struggle. I raised my daughters to have to not talk about the situation of their father. You know, when your kid is in grade school and the teacher asks, you know, write a little paragraph about what you did for the weekend. My daughter couldn't really write anything because our weekends were spent at the prison. And I didn't feel like that was nobody's business that her father was in prison. So I just schooled the school on how to treat my daughter in a different way because it was none of their business. So as time goes by, you know, you struggle as a wife because you're responsible for all your bills. You're also responsible for the things he needs. That's an added expense. I'm sending him money, but never once did he find a way to afford for me to. He would never send me nothing, and I realized I was wrong. But I worshipped him because I didn't have any other time but to go to work and worship him and go and be with him. So, as a wife of a prisoner or an inmate, you have to be extremely strong. You give up so much of your time in life. We made it through. He came home, and he wasn't ready. No, he was not ready. Everything about having a home bothered him. The street was too busy. Cars would park in front of the house, and he would swear up and down that, must be somebody I know, and it's a man, and so he must want you, but he can't come in because I'm here, We would sit on the couch, and he wouldn't allow me to even look towards the door or the window because I was probably making signals to these people outside. And all the money that I had sent him while in prison, he came home with it. About a quarter of the money. When I added it all up, it should have been close to 25 grand. Nope. Like 7. His first idea was he emptied my entire house of all my furnishings. My kids' toys, everything had to go. He didn't want them there. He went and bought some furniture and replaced it. My kids weren't allowed to play in the living room anymore because he didn't want that. There just were a lot of difficulties. He decided that he would decide to go back to the game that he had before, selling that stuff in the streets. But he wasn't going to go in the streets. It was his idea that I make those runs all night long. So, I have to get my kids up 3, 4, 5 times a night, pack them in the car, run across town, which wouldn't have been a problem had it been for money. But this was $10, $5. I grew extremely tired of the whole situation. So one day, his parole officer came over there, and I had had enough. I'm telling you, I put in work. I met that man when I was 15, and I probably put in work for close to 20 years. As I always tell my kids, I raised your daddy, and then I raised you. And then I came to Iowa and helped my mama for 20 years. So, what I can say after I did that long time with him, I still loved him very deeply, but I had no choice but to put distance between me and him. I left California. I had to, because I kept wanting him. And it wasn't no good for me, and it wasn't no good for my kids. So we still remained friends. We still were married. We were married for 37 years until November of this year. 30 days after I buried my mama in Iowa, he calls me. He's on his deathbed, and he begs me to come. I go. I go. He was the love of my life, so I go to him. I'm thinking all this, I've been gone for 20 years, even though we talked all the time. And, I thought he had a good life and he was living, high on the hog. So when he passed and I went to his house with his people out there, his family, this man was living average, very average, in a 2-bedroom apartment. There were no groceries. The TVs were old. The linens were old. I mean, it was just not fit for a king. It broke my heart to realize that I had done everything in my power to help this man be a king and have a family. And yet he went out this world. I don't know if he loved me or my children. My youngest daughter, who's now 24, he was our last child, his last baby, my last baby. She never had a relationship with him because he wouldn't put the effort in. He would call the house, but he only wanted to talk to me. So, if you have a wife out there or a girl, a gal, whatever you want to call her, respect her and understand that it takes two to do a marriage and that you got to put in work just like she put in work. Because I tell you, I'm still heartbroken. Another day.
Y'all know what's going on. I hope you enjoyed the show. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.